Well, welcome to another week's analysis behind the news. I have to apologize to everybody for the video that we did last week. Actually, I underestimated the problem. A lot of people are really upset over the things I had to say about RT, or Russia Today. It's actually worse than what I described it. With further analysis, with further research, it is really a rotten television station from the standpoint of telling you the things that you need to know about what's going on around the world. Within the United States, there is a certain amount of truth. There has to be. Just like Goebbels under the Nazi regime. If they'd lied 100% of the time in the Nazi propaganda, nobody would have listened. But they have to tell a certain amount of truth in order to inject the lies and the propaganda that they want. It's sort of like these two glasses. This is RT, Russian propaganda, and truth. And this will kill you. This is the truth. It's really fine. But even if you add it in here and try and dilute it, it still is a problem. You're still taking it in. It's still Russian propaganda. And it's not going to do you any good. A lot of people are not astute enough to be able to tell the pink from the red, and even the off pink. But a lot of times they will very subtly put propaganda in there within the truth to make you think that it is an entire truth, and it's not. They're in the business of working for the Russian government. They're not in the business of informing the American public. And then you see things like this, like communist demonstrations in Moscow, that you never see these pictures being displayed. You may see a demonstration, and it may be called a dissident demonstration or an anti-government demonstration or whatever else they put on it. But these are images of the hammer and sickle and that sort of thing in Moscow. Neither do we see these communist demonstrations, for instance, in India, or these communist demonstrations in Greece during the recent upheavals. This is just in April, So you don't see these things being portrayed on your regular television or on RT as far as that goes, because they don't want you to know what's really going on. Now let me give you a little background on something else that is very, very disturbing. The other day I was driving down to meet a group of businessmen, and on the way I listened to a BBC broadcast. That's the British broadcasting system. And they talked about the American space program. Now NASA has given up the space program ostensibly, yet it still has a space station that it has to supply, refurbish, reman, repair, that kind of thing. So what they've done is they've given out 2 contracts to private firms. Now, if the United States government paid the Russian government to develop its rocket program, the American taxpayer would probably rebel. They would start asking questions. Hey, what's going on here? Why are we paying for Russia's space program or inter-ballistic missile program to launch A-bombs at us or hydrogen bombs at us? This doesn't make sense. Well, this is the way it works. NASA is going into the intelligence business now. Instead of looking at the Earth from space, they're going to be looking at the entire Earth on cyberspace. So they've given out 2 contracts to private firms to refurbish the space station. Now, according to the BBC, the man visited one of the contractors in Virginia, for instance, and went into this huge hangar that were on display to show the various things they were putting together in production, etc., to launch rockets up to meet the space station. Well, as he's walking in, he says, well, wait a minute. This rocket is from the Ukraine. That was the largest state outside of Russia that was part of the communist Russian Empire, the USSR. Well, it seems as though they've got these rockets over there for sale. So they go over there and they buy these rockets and bring them to the United States. Then the engines are laying on their sides. He says they're huge, they're massive, and they're from the USSR. And he says, I use the term USSR because they were made by Soviet Russia. These are still the engines that were made by the Soviet Union. So here we are, we're buying these rockets and engines from the Soviet Union and putting them together here to resupply in an American space station. Now, what do they do with that money? We pay them, the taxpayer, gives the money to the government gives the money to the private contractor gives the money to the Russian rocket program. So what can they do with that? Well, gee, they'll probably spend it on food for the poor in Siberia, sure. Of course not. What they're going to do with that money is build more rockets, newer rockets, better rockets. Rockets to do what? I'll leave it to your imagination. So you see this daisy chain of the money that goes from you to the Russian rocket program, and a lot of people don't even know that this is going on. It's the same thing that was going on during the Vietnam War. When the John Birch Society got millions of people to sign a petition to stop all aid and trade to communist countries because our own government was facilitating the supplying of our own enemy in North Vietnam, through Yugoslavia, through Czechoslovakia, through Poland. We were sending them all sorts of war material so that they could in turn kill our own men. It was a sad part of the history of the Vietnam War that most people didn't even know what was going on, never would have known if it hadn't been for the John Birch Society. The same thing is happening again today. And we ask you to take a deeper look at some of these programs that are going on to see just where does this money go in the end. Until next week, we'll see you then.